In the days when ice cream sundaes cost a lot less, a 10-year-old boy entered a hotel coffee shop and sat at the table. And a waitress brought him a glass of water and put it in front of him. How much, he asked, is an ice cream sundae? 50 cents, replied the waitress. The boy pulled out his hand from his pocket and shifted through the coins that he had there, and there was 50 cents exactly. So he looked up and he asked, how much for a dish of plain ice cream? Well, there were people waiting for a table by now, and the waitress was getting just a little bit impatient. 35 cents, she said brusquely. The little boy counted the coins again. And then he said, I'll have a plain ice cream, please. The waitress brought the ice cream, put the bill on the table in front of him, and walked away. And the little boy finished the ice cream, paid the cashier, and departed. And when the waitress came back, she began wiping down the table and then swallowed hard when she saw what she saw, and that was there, neatly placed beside the empty dish, 2 nickels and 5 pennies, her tip. A tip is our gratitude for service to us. The prevailing amount is 15% with 20% for extra special care. Every good thing that you and I have in our lives comes from God. He asks a measly 10%. I think we can manage that. I think we might even expect to do better. Let us worship God with our tithes and our offerings.
He promised us that he would be a counselor, a mighty God, and the Prince of Peace. He promised us that he would be our Father, and he would love us with a love that would not cease.
Well, I tried him, and I found his promises are true. He's everything he said that he would be. The finest words I know could not begin to tell just how much Jesus really means to me. For he's more wonderful than my mind can conceive. He's more wonderful than my heart can believe. He goes beyond my highest hopes and fondest dreams. He's everything that my soul ever longed for, everything he's promised, and so much more. He's more than amazing, more than marvelous, more than miraculous could ever be. He's more than wonderful. That's what Jesus is to me. I stand amazed to think that the King of glory would come to live within the heart of man. I marvel just to know he really loves me when I think of who he is and who I am. For he conceive. He's more wonderful than my heart can believe. He goes beyond my highest hopes and fondest dreams. He's everything.
He's everything
that my soul ever longed for, everything He's promised, and so much more. He's more than amazing, more than marvelous, more than miraculous could ever be. He's more than wonderful. That's what Jesus is to me. He's everything that my soul ever longed for, everything He's promised, and so much more. He's more than amazing, more than marvelous, more than miraculous could ever be. He's more than wonderful, more than wonderful. That's what Jesus is.
That's what Jesus is
to me.
He's more than
wonderful to me.
Now, our scripture lesson for this morning is from Acts chapter 27, and it's a humongously long account that Luke writes about the disaster that befell St. Paul on his way to Rome. And so I have prepared excerpts from it, and I would love for you to be able to follow along in your pew Bibles. The only thing is I'll be jumping all over the place, so if you want to anyway, do the best you can. These are the words of Luke from his Gospel, chapter 27 of the Acts. I said it was Luke. I think I forgot to mention it was the book of Acts. And when it was decided that we should sail for Italy, they proceeded to deliver Paul and some other prisoners to a centurion of the Augustan cohort named Julius. And embarking in an Adramyttian ship, which was about to sail to the regions along the coast of Asia, we put out to sea, accompanied by Aristarchus, a Macedonian of Thessalonica. And when a moderate south wind came up, supposing that they had gained their purpose, they weighed anchor and began sailing along Crete, close inshore. But before long, there rushed down from the land a violent wind called Euraquilo. And when the ship was caught in it and could not face the wind, we gave way to it and let ourselves be driven along. And running under the shelter of a small island called Clauda, we were scarcely able to get the ship's boat under control. And after they had hoisted it up, they used supporting cables in undergirding the ship, and fearing that they might run aground on the shallows of Syrtis, they let down the sea anchor so as to let themselves be driven along. The next day, as we were being violently storm-tossed, they began to jettison the cargo, and on the third day, they threw the ship's tackle overboard with their own hands. And since neither sun nor stars appeared for many days and no small storm was assailing us, from then on all hope of our being saved was gradually abandoned. But when the 14th night had come, as we were being driven about in the Adriatic Sea about midnight, the sailors began to surmise that they were approaching some land, and they took soundings and found it to be 20 fathoms. And a little farther on, they took another sounding and found it to be 15 fathoms. And fearing that they might run aground somewhere on the rocks, they cast 4 anchors from the stern and wished for daybreak. And as the sailors were trying to escape from the ship and had let down the ship's boat into the sea on the pretense of intending to lay out the anchors from the bow, Paul said to the centurion and to the soldiers, "Unless these men remain in the ship, you yourselves cannot be saved." Then the soldiers cut away the ropes of the ship's boat and let it fall away. And until the day was about to dawn, Paul was encouraging them all to take some food, saying, "Today is the 14th day that you have been constantly watching and going without eating, having taken nothing. Therefore I encourage you to take some food, for this is for your preservation. For not a hair from the head of any of you is going to perish." And having said this, he took bread and gave thanks to God in the presence of all. And he broke it and began to eat. And all of them were encouraged, and they themselves also took food. And all of us in the ship were 276 persons. And when they had eaten enough, they began to lighten the ship by throwing out the wheat into the sea. And when day came, they could not recognize the land, but they did observe a certain bay with a beach. And they resolved to drive the ship onto it if they could. And casting off the anchors, they left them in the sea, while at the same time they were loosening the ropes of the rudders and hoisting the foresail to the wind. They were heading for the beach, but striking a reef where the 2 seas met, they ran the vessel aground, and the prow stuck fast and remained immovable. But the stern began to be broken up by the force of the waves, and the soldiers' plan was to kill the prisoners, that none of them should swim away and escape. But the centurion, wanting to bring Paul safely through, kept them from their intention and commanded that those who could swim should jump overboard and get to land, and the rest should follow, some on planks and others on various things from the ship. And this happened so that all were brought safely to land. Now, this story of Paul's shipwreck is famous in the Bible. And in it, the writer says, some of those on the ship were brought on broken pieces of the ship safely to land. And I think that that's a suggestive picture, as it comes to us from the King James Version, of the world today. For many months and years, St. Paul had been counting on a visit to Rome. He had written the profoundest of all his interpretations of Christianity to the church in that capital city, and the epistle was intended to be a prelude to his visit. And then in a very unexpected way, the opportunity came. He went to Rome as a prisoner in the charge of a centurion of the Augustan cohort, and he got to land in Malta on broken pieces of the ship. Somewhere in the Adriatic Sea, excuse me, their boat was caught in a tempestuous windstorm, a cyclone, called by the early translators Euroclydon, more commonly today a levanter, but out of the northeast, so rendered in most modern translations simply as a nor'easter. The ship was blown about like an eggshell for 14 days in the teeth of this storm. And then the passengers were tossed onto shore on the island of Malta on, says Luke, broken pieces of the ship, with the entire cargo lost. This story is relevant, I believe, because there is a Euroclydon in our time. Right now, reminiscent of the days of Attila the Hun, Adolf Hitler, and Genghis Khan, a barbaric, poisonous scourge some call radical Islam is sweeping the world, pillaging historical sites and butchering populations with astounding brutality, unleashing waves of refugees to overpower the shores and resources of remaining civilizations, and striking terror in cultures great and small across the globe. So that even here in America, oceans away, the FBI director testifies on Capitol Hill that he cannot foresee averting the violence that is coming, or that indeed is already here for much longer. In our own country, traditional character, which has been eroding in some sense since the end of World War II, is collapsing at a rate that justifies a general alarm. Shedding its veneer of faith and civility, human nature in America is showing its true colors, the dark colors in which the Bible for 4,000 years has painted it without God: ignorant, arrogant, self-centered, brutal, and corrupt. The sexual revolution has brought us to the brink of the biblical Gomorrah. Urbanization has killed our charm. Secularism has erased our depth. Technology is sapping our soul. Harebrained philosophies shared from bar stools a half-century ago are now inflicted on the wider culture via the internet. Truth has lost its meaning, being whatever you and I decide it is to suit ourselves, which makes it anything and everything by popular whim, and therefore nothing. Propaganda replaces news. Executive power substitutes itself for legislation. Upholding the law is conditioned upon its suitability. Cause trumps coherence. Order slides into chaos. Whatever you may think is happening to us in this country and to us in this world, we must all agree it is certainly a storm. Now, the thing that held Paul's mind steady in the grip of that Adriatic Euroclydon, there were actually 4 things. He had 4 anchors of faith. In the midst of the crisis, it was not the captain of the ship who was in command of the situation, according to Luke's story, was it? Nor the centurion of the cohort. It was the prisoner. He stood upon the deck with the storm roaring through the torn rigging and the frightened seamen, soldiers, passengers standing around him, worn and hungry, and instantly he, maybe with chains on his hands, dominated that wild scene. A little later, officers were to heave 4 anchors from the stern to hold the ship until morning from the rocks at the shore of the island. But here on the deck, in the dark and the storm, stood a man who was telling the group around him of 4 anchors of another kind, anchors which held him firm and steady and unafraid, not only in the face of this Euroclydon or all Euroclydons, but before the great dangers of mobs and courts and headsmen. And here were his 4 anchors. I believe God. I am his. I serve him. And he has given me those who sail with me. Now, I want us all to realize this morning that that's pretty much a whole gospel. Paul doesn't say, I believe in God in a weak, thin way. Everybody on the ship could have said that. What Paul is saying for his first anchor is that he has discovered the heart and character of God. And that he not only believes in God's existence, but he can settle back in complete trust and confidence in the divine purposes and have assurance of everlasting arms of love around him in the crisis and the danger. It is an incontrovertible conviction, not only in the reality of God, but that God is with us and for us. That is an anchor. And the next one is a still surer grip on reality. I am his. I not only believe him, trust his character, and feel safe in his keeping, but I belong to him. Little boy playing on the deck of a ship through a severe storm was asked by a passenger why he didn't seem to be afraid. I'm not afraid, said the little boy. My daddy is the captain of the ship. We have found each other, St. Paul is saying. And I belong to him, and he is mine. That was something new to the frightened men on that ship, and it's still strange news to men and women's ears. We say that God is omnipotent, sure, omniscient, but too exalted, really, for us poor worms of the dust to belong to him. And that may be metaphysics, but it's certainly not faith, and it's not even religion, and it's not even very good metaphysics. Here, in the inner experience, I am his. I belong to him. It's a sheet anchor of true Christian faith. And the third anchor goes even deeper. I serve him. I serve him. Which means he needs me. He needs me for the carrying out of his purposes. This is St. Paul's famous principle that we are fellow laborers, co-workers with God. And this principle immediately dignifies every life and raises it to a new level. If it's true, what does it mean? It means that some of God's work in the world will never get done unless you do it. The compass needle is a very small bit of things, but Columbus would never have found America without it. Don't count yourself lost. Our range of life may not be very large, but there is some piece of God's work that will not get done, maybe through all the ages, unless we do it. That insight ought to be an anchor in a stormy world when all the sails are aflap. And then comes the fourth anchor. All these other lives are dependent on me. I don't think there are very many things more that bring greater solemnity and steadiness to one's life than the discovery that other people's lives depend on us. In the high Alps, I'm told, you must not speak above a whisper, because a loud noise may reverberate and start an avalanche crashing down the mountain. So delicately balanced are all those piled up masses of snow. Well, it seems to me that social relationships, human dependencies, are even more sensitive than that. Looks and whispers and even silences may affect other lives and shape their destiny. We know that other lives shape and mold us, but we wake up all of a sudden to realize that others hang on us as well and are going to be shaped maybe for all time by the course of our lives. The fourth anchor, this discovery that all the lives on the ship, 276 in this particular story, hung on him and his faith and action, was not the least important of Paul's four anchors in the Euroclydon near Malta. I cannot think of anything else but this type of faith that will save us now. The old comfortable ship, which seemed to be unsinkable, is being wrecked before our eyes. We will come to shore only on its broken pieces. the future of humanity and the capacity to reorder our world and our country depend almost entirely on the recovery of anchors of stability, pillars of faith, like those that held St. Paul calm and steady in his Mediterranean storm. The major psychologists are all telling us that health depends to a high degree on faith. It's even more true of social and national health because the roots of morale and confidence are always fed deep down by faith. And yet we are living in a cut flower civilization. The roots are gone, and the flower cannot survive if we don't learn this lesson. If we go on supposing that all we need to do is to prepare a strong defense and outfight the evil around us as though it were some tangible enemy that can be engaged on land and sea and in the air, we are doomed to see an incredible era ahead of us. And this time we may not even come to shore as we have before on broken pieces of the ship. The most important preparedness for those of us who are here in the churches keeping the home fire burning is the recovery of faith and the discovery of adequate resources for our souls. But this text is capable of other applications as well. How many of us have had to do our work and to arrive at our goals in life with broken health, with a body not fully obedient to our wills? Health is better than rubies, it says. A body stored with tireless energy is a treasure indeed, but how many of us have it? How many of the world's workers and creators have arrived with a broken body? Pascal was a lifelong invalid. So too was Elizabeth Barrett Browning. William of Orange, William III of England, had no health of body to back his mind. Whittier was never well. And the host of our own friends and acquaintances have gone to shore clinging to a spar. Many a faith has been rebuilt after faith has gone to wreck in some Euroclydon. In fact, a twice-born faith, a rebuilt faith, is perhaps superior to an inherited faith that has never stood the strain of a great testing storm. If you have not clung to a broken piece of your old ship in the dark night of your soul, your faith may not have the sustaining power to carry you through to the end of the journey. The odd thing is that very often the solidest character that we meet, the greatest saintliness, comes after life has been broken. I am here, Christ said, to save sinners, broken vessels, persons whose lives have cracked under the strain. Peter and Paul and Mary Magdalene and Augustine and Paul Bunyan, just to name a few. How often have we heard the excuse of broken time? I should write, but I haven't had time. I'm constantly being interrupted. My time is shattered to pieces. I only have tiny fragments of time to do anything important. Well, the most important work that has been done in the world has been done by persons who have had no unbroken time. The greatest books, the greatest paintings, the greatest statesmanship have been produced in broken time. It's not the time that's lacking for great things, although the time is always lacking. It's the Spirit. We may well come back then in the end to the way Paul got to Rome to fulfill his commission, to attest to the gospel of the grace of God. He too had broken time, broken health, a broken faith, a broken character, and a broken world around him, and he got to land on broken pieces of the ship. And so may we, and so may we, on the body and blood of Christ. Let us pray. As you speak, O Lord, so may we hear. As you will, O Father, so may we do. In Jesus. Amen.